Hi, welcome to the April 6th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started here in just a couple of minutes. I'll do a quick audio test. Okay, so it sounds like it's coming through fine. All right, my name is Greg Undo. I'm the host for the live stream today. And if you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field, or questions could be submitted in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We will try to go through the questions as chronologically as they're asked and get through the questions that were sent in towards the end. So for just a couple of notes before we get started. So my family is at home during this time, so I may get interrupted at some point. So I'll apologize for any interruptions that may come. The ability to ask questions will far exceed my ability to answer them. So if we could try to, if you don't see a response to your question, if we could try to avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that just kind of slows down the whole process. So, and when asking a question, sometimes if you could indicate which version of Cubase, like I'm running Cubase 11 Pro on Windows 10 or Cubase Elements on Mac Big Sur, that information sometimes is helpful. And for those people that are watching live, as we're letting some people get logged in, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, and also if this is your first Club Cubase live stream, let us know that too. So we see some questions already kind of submitted. We see Casey Dodson, who logged in. We have Walter Blackledge from St. Louis in the U.S. We have John Wells in Japan. We have Marek, who's logging in from Prague. Okay, so Casey is from Southwest Florida. So used to be part of my sales territory years ago. So used to go to Fort Myers to Brent's Music all the time. All right, so we have from Dusseldorf, Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. All right, so we have Filter Freak from the south of England, Uno from Finland, Agent K, mysterious location. And Agent K is always kind enough to do some moderation for us. Okay, great to see Michael Pearson hang out. We have Soren from Sweden. We hope you had a great birthday on Friday. All right, we have Stefan from Sweden. We have Jazz Dude from Heidelberg, Germany. Christopher Hallam from Columbia, South Carolina. I used to like doing presentations down at in Columbia. All right, so we have Theodore from London. We have Trance 2020 from Berkshire, UK. All right, so we have Philip from Montenegro. We have Jan, who's kind enough to do cubaseindex.com. So if you want to see if there's been a question that's been covered before, you could go to cubaseindex.com and search through all the thousands of questions that we've covered. So thanks, Jan, for doing that. All right, so we have Christophe from France, first-time attendee. Welcome. All right, so we have South Africa, Dominique from Vermont. All right, so we have James from LA. All right, David Smith from Frederick, Maryland. We have Greece, India, Vancouver. We have Pablo from Galicia, España. Always great to see Pablo on. We have Heist Building, who's from a very small village in Germany. Sir Robert from Atlanta. Okay, so once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the U.S. distributor for Steinberg products, and so I work as kind of a product specialist, focusing primarily on Steinberg products. I'm presenting from Alexandria, Virginia. So, but we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. Okay, so we have from John Wells, who's checked in a bit early because it's in the middle of the night in Japan, or very, very early. So probably like 2 a.m. in Japan. So it says, I'm somewhat a novice to the audio sampler. Could you explain, after setting up the parameters in a sampler, how to actually use it in the mix? Should I automate it or play over in a separate channel? I have no idea how to make use of it. I can only tweak the settings so far. Thanks for all the help, mate. Okay, so let's say if I have a sample that I want to work with, I could come over here. Let's get to just my MediaBay, and I'll just look through a couple of different loops here. So I'll do some vocal samples. So let's say, so what I could do from the MediaBay is I could right click and we'll say create sampler track. And as we do this, this has now created a sampler track that we can now have our audio file, and we could play this audio file. And I could play different pitches, so it's determined that kind of the root is on the G sharp 3, it looks like. So, but I could play this. So now we could just play. So we're able to just kind of play that audio file, triggering it from Midi. So once we have that, we could just sequence. So if I wanted to just mute this, and let's say if I just wanted to record as... So now when we look at this, this will in fact trigger those particular samples where we would see the, so we see the MIDI notes that trigger these particular samples. Now, a couple things that you could do with the sampler track is, as you come over here, you could choose, like now if I play a note that's lower than kind of the root pitch, it plays it slower like a real sampler does. So this is our original tempo. So if I play higher pitch, it's quicker. But if I wanted those to be the same, I could just come right over here and enable audio warp. So now whatever I actually play, we could just put it into different audio warp. And now if I wanted to play like this as a chord, you could do stuff like that, and we could adjust different parameters such as deformant. So if you want to do some interesting kind of sound design type of function with that. And then if you had different, like a drum loop, we could get into slicing of the loop. So let's say if I wanted to go to, let's do a quick drum loop. These are all MIDI loops here, so let me just... All right, so if I wanted to make another sampler track from this, we could actually go to the slice command. And at this point, we could slice our different drum loops. And once we have a slice that's been done, we could drag this out into our project window. And now each of the different slices will automatically play back for us. So I could just trigger these chromatically. So if I wanted to kind of replay those different samples, we could do that. Now, as we want to get into like applying filters, so say if I wanted to take this particular note here, let me just set my range of notes that we're dealing with here. Let me just... So if I wanted to literally just kind of, try different filter types. So we can say, I just want to do like a classic filter. So you could just kind of take the voice and be able to do different functions. And then you could also set up different LFOs. But once you have it kind of the audio loaded, it will then you can just start playing it as particular samples. So any sound that you see, you could just kind of right click and create a sampler track. And then that will just show up directly on your project window and you could just start to play. And it's really just a MIDI message from your controller keyboard or MIDI note that's just triggering that particular sample. And that's how to sample. It's a quick overview how to kind of get started with the sampler track. All right, we had a question from Mark. Thanks for your wonderful answers from the last Hangout. A new one. How can I increase the gain level of the left or right channel at about 1 dB? So if it's going to be just on let's say I'll do this jazz piece here. So let's just say I'll mute some of these. There's a couple of different approaches that you could do this. Let's say we're playing our jazz piece. And let me just check some of my routing here quickly. Okay, so if I wanted to, let's open up like our meter here. And so if I just wanted to adjust my panning, you can see as I pan it more to the right, you can see visually that the panning, or if I want to do the opposite, make the left channel louder, you could use the balance panner. Now, if you wanted to do, let's say, more of an editing type function, what you could do is select that track. If you go to your project and you could just say convert tracks, so we say multi-channel to mono. And then as we've done this, you could now just say, okay, we want to have our left and right channels are broken out, and then you could adjust kind of the level on each of these channels. And if you wanted to do the opposite after doing that, you could just go to project, convert tracks, and do the opposite and say mono to multi-channel, and that will make it into a stereo file with the gain adjustments on each of the tracks. So 2 different ways that you could do it. Okay, so to see a question, will there be a full integration of Dorico Pro in Cubase so I could see the score in Dorico and change it there and play it afterwards in Cubase? Thank you. So I think that we'll see that kind of going, maybe towards that direction. I'm not sure what the time frame is. Obviously, Dorico is a very advanced notation and has different workflows than Cubase. Like when you do... it's kind of 2 different schools of thought with notation programs. One is kind of a sequencer that displays notation. One is notation that plays back as a sequence. So right now, we could even just kind of drag and drop parts between them quite easily. But I think we'll see stuff kind of heading there. But we don't have that happening currently. So... Okay, so question. When I have a song in, let's say, C flat, how can I avoid seeing all those sharps in Key Editor and Scale Assistant? I see only sharp scales as well. Thank you. Okay, so let's say if I have... I'll just come over here and let's take a look. All right, so generally you probably wouldn't want C flat as a musical thing. You'd probably want it to be B natural. So that's kind of more the kind of musically accepted way to do that. So let's say if I wanted to go to my scale assistant, all right, so let's say we see it as a, let's say if I want it to be in B flat, we could see it here. And often, like if we have the chord track, so say if I'm here, we could set this to B flat, and let's say if I wanted to set like my scale here, so let's just say I wanted to do so I know generally like with this you could do kind of the harmonic shift. So if you wanted to switch that to flat, but let's take a look in, let's say, our scale here. All right, so let's just say I wanted to be in, my scale assistant. I want this to be in B. So I think if you gave kind of a right, so say I'll just come right over here. Let me just put some. So as I just kind of randomly put some notes in, let's say we're in B major. So, if you, so you could choose to use the chord track and define the scales from the chord track if you really wanted it to be C flat. But there's also a preference to check out here. I think if we go under editing, we just look for this preference. So and you could also try to check this preference here. So if you go to preferences, event display, chords and pitches, you could choose to get the enharmonics from the chord track. So I would try that. I think that will take care of it for you. But yeah, if you give a musician something in C flat, they will not like you. Give it to them in B major. So just see, hi Greg, I can't make Maschine work in Cubase. I'd like to use Maschine first generation hardware to write MIDI in Cubase, but can't make it work. I've watched all YouTube videos you can imagine. So, generally I think Maschine would work just as, it's as a MIDI controller into Cubase. So I don't use Maschine. And I've never kind of played with it other than a couple minutes at a music store when they were open. But I think that once you have Maschine installed, the drivers that you should see the Maschine MIDI interface input driver here, and then that will pass all of the MIDI data from the pads directly into Cubase. So just make sure that you have the driver installed. And then you should see the driver in the list here. And once that's connected, you should be able to capture all of the MIDI data coming out of Maschine directly into Cubase. Okay, question. My contact began having latency no matter how low the buffer size. My Army sound card and driver software are the best. Can you point me all issues to check for under preferences or studio menu version 10.5? So it could be that once you have a instrument loaded up, depending on the plugins being used. So let's say if I wanted to come and let's find just hang on just 1 second. Okay, just got an email from Chase who attends, so I'll respond to him after. All right, but let's say if I just wanted so there's a couple things that could cause additional latency. So let's say if I play, and you can probably hear my controller and the mic, and this is perfectly fine latency. But if you go to, let's say your master fader here, and let's say if you have a lot of plugins that are on your master bus, and plugins that could be very, maybe if you have like mastering plugins or let's say like a multi-band compressor, and these can often have a bit of latency as you go to play. So just having these plugins in your signal path can cause a lot of latency. So I will go ahead and I'll just hit the MIDI note here. So if I wanted to actually just look at the particular instrument, I will come here and you'll see that even as I click on the keyboard here, because of those plugins that are inserted, that there's a delay. So one way to kind of bypass all of the plugins that are causing latency is just to come here to the constrained delay compensation. So turn that on, and what that will do is bypass those particular plugins so that you can play. So say, and I turn this off. Now it's like a badly dubbed foreign film. And with those plugins bypassed with the constrained delay compensation, so at that point, you could just have a lot of latency, and for the performance while you're playing it in, you could just turn on a constrained delay compensation, and that will minimize your latency for you. All right, so we just see a question. What the heck is this? So this is our Club Cubase live stream where you can answer questions on any of your Steinberg products. Okay, so a question from Uno Momento. Hi from Finland. I was wondering if it is possible to adjust the magnification in the score editor steplessly. All right, so let's say if I have, find something with some, show you just a quick way to do this. Okay, so let's say if I'm looking at like maybe my piano part here. So, if you hold down the control or command key, and if you're in page view, you could just use your mouse scroll wheel to kind of zoom in like that. So just control and use the mouse scroll wheel to zoom. So I'm not sure if that's steplessly, but let me know if that works for you, Uno. But to be able to just kind of come right over there and look at a couple pages or look at one page and kind of do some fine editing of slurs and stuff like that. All right, so we have John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Good to have you on the live stream. All right, so we have a couple people. All right, so we have Philip from Montenegro's catching his first hangout. Welcome. All right, and occasionally my chat field will jump on me like it just did. So I may lose a question or two as it kind of gets. I have lots of questions in my future. So just see, are there plans to further integrate Dorico and Cubase? I know that Presonus just did this with Studio One by using their own Notion to create a new score view in the DAW. So, I think that we'll see more integration going on in the future. So I haven't heard of the exact plans, but I know that the Dorico teams and the Steinberg teams are already, working on stuff to make transitioning between the two programs easier. All right, so we have David KO65 joining from Slovakia. That's where my grandparents are from. All right, so we have Leo from Ireland, Maurice from Quebec. All right, so we have Menno, and he's a Cubase addict. So you're in the right place. All right, so we have Bruno from Lisbon. So question, is it possible to make our own shapes in Chopper plugin? So I don't think so, but let's go ahead and take a look just to see. Yes, I think we're kind of limited to, you could adjust kind of the tilt of it, but not anything where we could do more. So, but I'll pass that along. Okay, so question about Pro 11. In the inspector display under the R automation is a switch for linear and musical time base. When is that used? How? What function does it have? So we could think of this as being more if something is in linear or musical time base is going to be basically whether the actual event, if we do tempo changes, if the event is tied to the bar and beat, and that's what musical mode is, or if we do it to linear, where it's tied not to the bar and beat, but to the time value. So let's say if I wanted to take this piano piece, so let's say we're at, I'll just turn the chopper plugin off on this, so it would be less annoying. All right, so let's say so we're in musical mode. So now as I adjust the tempo, that the MIDI information that we'll see here will just follow the tempo. So that means that it's going to be basically set to the bar and beat. But when this is set to linear mode, as I adjust the tempo, that's going to play back at the same time. But if I put this, so that's playing at the same time position. So in this mode, it's the events will, if there's tempo changes, will be based upon their actual time. And this mode will follow based on, as soon as we have this, it will just follow based on the tempo of the positions of the different notes. So that's what the two modes do. So I just see comment, scale assistant doesn't seem to like borrowed chords too much. Can you fix this in an update? So if you wanted to do more of, not necessarily, more complex situations, because the scale is, determined for the scale itself, but you could derive the actual scale from the chord track. So if there's a chord track in the project with many different borrowed chords. So let's say if I just wanted to come here and let's just put in some chords. That once you're in the scale assistant here, so, we could think of, if you needed more complex harmonies with, you could have the chord track, instead of using the editor scale, just use the chord track itself. And then you could use that as the basis for it. All right, great to see Sub 403 on the live stream from British Columbia. All right, so we see from Nick Paget, is this still available for the next 24 hours? I need to go out, but this is massive useful. So it'll be available to watch on YouTube. So you can watch years of these live streams on YouTube. So. Okay, so I just see, hi Greg, why when you drag an audio track down to sample track, the level does down so much? So it could be depending on the last version. So let's say if I am here and I have a loop, all right, so it could be that, this level that you're using for the preview level. Let's see if that has an impact on it. So say if I create a sampler track now, that as soon as we play this, so, it seems kind of the same volume, But it could be, you could always just make sure that you have your volume here set to 0. So I've seen sometimes where people will have a sampler track volume down, but just check. But, that seems like it was same volume for me. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, I have a problem with the Supervision plugin because it consumes a lot of processor performance. What all have to do with it? Thank you. So, it can take a lot of, I think that we'll see some kind of performance enhancements coming with that, but depending on your plugin, that you're using for it. So, depending on some of the settings can be more intense. So I think if we go over here to the inserts, so I think if you go into, so that was horribly wrong. All right. But if we go into more of the envelope, some of these could be more graphically intense, and depending on your computer and, how your, your graphics card is processing that. So just realize that some of the displays will be more, intense for your graphics card than others. And sometimes adjusting some of the performance settings in your graphics card could help. But I think we may see some other performance enhancements coming soon with that. Okay, so we have a question. I'm using a PC. My friend has a Mac. Is it possible to send him a channel setting I saved, such as my bass guitar channel setting? Thanks. Yeah, no problem. You could take your channel settings, track presets, anything, and kind of go back and forth between Mac and PC without any issues. All right, so we have a question, how to make our loops in VST sound format with metadata in the MediaBay. So all you have to do, anytime that we have an audio file. So let's say if I came here and I just, I wanted to render just a bit of this particular audio file. So now, when I come in here, I will go ahead and let's just do a render in place. Okay, so we can see that this is going to be, so we can look at this file, and this is automatically going to show up when we go to our MediaBay. So I will come over here to this computer. Let's go to Documents, and where I have it saved is Projects and Hangouts, and it should be April, or not Hangouts, but it's going to be in this file called For Grace. Okay, so I'm going to have Cubase just automatically look in there. So our new audio file, so is right here, Greedo. That's the one that we've just done. So the MediaBay is automatically recognized that. And now when we want to add your own metadata, it's all right here, and you could choose to add all of your own metadata to the file, and that will be stored in your computer, so you can call it up at any time. So anytime that there's an audio file and that folder is being looked at, you could just come right over here and have it's going to be seen within Cubase, so you could access it from your MediaBay. And then if you wanted to add other metadata, You could do that here. You could go to your settings, and you could even make up your own metadata fields if it isn't in here. It has most musical context already there. All right, wonderful to see Taylor Sapp on the Hangout from Pine Grove. So question, is there a way to follow chords with any melody vocal like jazz pop? I mean, there should be a program that hears the vocal firstly and then puts the chords. So currently, we could have a chord track and then have that figured out. I imagine that there is some program that would do it. I would hazard to say that the results might be a little not, figuring out the chords from a melody could be really tough to do in a correct musical manner. I'm sure that there's AI algorithms that are probably working on it, but the reason why you probably don't see a tool to do that is because when you play when you have a melody note, do you take each note into its own chords? Do you take do you go to 5, 7, 9 voice chords to fit the potential melody? So it gets to be kind of infinite. So there really isn't a way I know of that could do that properly. I'm sure someone is working on something that can automatically make the chords fit the melody, but I think it's just a little bit of musical sensibility was still going to have to be part of that for a while. You see that Pablo Vasquez from he doesn't remember his questions, so panic. Anyway. All right, so we have David Fiormanti. Hi everyone. This is my grade 12 English period. Only 2 of my students showed up. It's exam week, so here I am. Good for you. I hope you're the teacher. All right. Okay, question. How to change the meter color scheme? I want to see Nuendo reddish colors. So if you wanted to go to your mix console and change the meter, so let's say if I just wanted to play... But all you have to do for your meter colors is go to Preferences, and you'll see under Metering Appearance. And now you could adjust kind of your meter colors at will here. So you could say, okay, I want it more red, or I want to change this color to be more bluish, whatever you want. So you could come over here and change colors however you want. And then you could add different meter positions, different meter colors. So that could all be handled right here. So go to metering to appearance, and I believe it's the same identical features between Cubase and Nuendo. So I'll just go back to my default meters and hit OK. So you could do it there. All right, great to see Mark Rabin on Hangout from Montana. Grateful for these lessons of awesomeness. I'm glad you feel that way. So question, are we going to have any new updates in Cubase, Greg? So there's, of course, always people working on stuff. So I think we'll see one pretty soon. So that's about all I could say. So, we generally don't comment on stuff before it's released. But yeah, I think we'll see one soon. But, the development team is always, very actively working on different functions. All right. Jazz Dude wants everyone to kick the like button. All right. Okay, so Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas has arrived. So that's good. And he's saying hi to everyone in Cubase Nation, and he's going to give ice cream to everyone. That's good. So. Okay, so question. Hey, Greg, in which way do you use the plugins that have latency? Are you using it when you're mixing, and how much latency is no noticeable? So when you're mixing, you could have all of the plugins and, however many plugins that you have in latency, and you're not going to notice it because all the latency is compensated for. So Cubase knows that this plugin takes this amount of processing time and this amount of processing power and plays that back and compensates for it. So anytime that you have plugins, Cubase compensates for their latency on playback. Where it could be critical is if you have a lot of those plugins and you're tracking like we were showing earlier. So if you're tracking and there's too much latency at that point, that's when I would go to the constrained delay compensation. But for mixing, I wouldn't even worry about, because it's automatically taken care of for you by Cubase, because Cubase does all of the automatic delay compensation for all the plugins for you. All right, so we see Agent K giving thanks to Michael Teams for the ice cream, so that's good. All right, great to see Chase Bethia on the Hangout. All right, and Gareth has made his way to the Hangout. That's great. And he wants everyone to hit the like button. Okay, so I have a question. How to use the tempo track? Okay, so I'll just do like a new project. Okay, so I'll just add a quick, maybe we'll do a quick bass line. Or we'll just do Rhodes here, and I'll just do a quick step entry. Okay, so I'll just put this on quarter notes. Okay. Okay, so I'll just activate my, just get some MIDI notes in so we can show this. I'll just draw some in here. Okay, so let's say we have our little MIDI pattern here. So let's say we'll listen to this. Okay, so let's say we'll just have this part just kind of loop. So let's say if we want to do just a quick tempo map, I could add a tempo track here. Now right now it's set to kind of a fixed value. I could turn on the tempo track. And now if I wanted to draw in tempo changes, I could just draw in. So if I wanted to kind of ramp up, now if you wanted to just, instead of ramping, just to go straight, if you kind of just click right here, we could choose this to be step. So we could say right at this point, I want it to be faster, I want it to be slower. And then you can say, okay, I want it to ramp up. Then our tempo is going to just kind of ramp up. So this way we could see all of our different tempo points here. And if I wanted to say I like this curve, but I want everything to be slower, or if I wanted to kind of scale it, I could just kind of come over here or compress the tempo. So those are a couple things on how you could start working with the tempo track. All right, so according to Gareth, I get a free ice cream scoop for every like, so that'd be good. All right, reading through comments. All right, so I just see, hello, Greg. I can't view all of this live, but I hope you cover what you can about the render in place function. All right, so this is one of the questions that we had that someone had mailed in was, you know, if I wanted to take this part and turn it into an audio file to do render in place. And I think, and what they were running into was it was a silent file. So they came over here and thought that they were doing everything correct by going into render in place, going to render settings, and let's say you do render in place. And what they had found was when they had record enabled, I think it was on an audio track, that it would render out kind of a blank silence. So make sure, like, if it's for an audio track, that you don't have that rendered out. But let's say if I have this particular track and I wanted to turn it into audio quickly, but let's say we had, as we're playing this track, I go to the audio, and let's say if I wanted to put in a delay, as a send, so say I'll just put in like a ping pong delay. All right, and let's say I wanted a flanger here as insert or put a phaser in. Let's try just a little flanger and stuff. All right, so we have all of these different effects. I have EQ. Say if we have our channel strip here, I want to apply just a little bit of compression. And now if I wanted to turn that into audio, if you want just to now render that, let's go to our edit menu to render in place. And let's go to our render settings. So one is if I had this as multiple events, which I'll just show here just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so if I wanted this to, so we'll go to edit to render in place, and now we'll go through some of the different settings. So we could choose to have this automatically create separate events, block events, and a block event will render this as an audio file until the next event starts, or all as one event. I want this to be dry with none of the processing. So no delay, no flanger, no EQ. I want the channel settings. This is their channel strip and EQ. The complete signal path, and this will also include the inserts. The complete signal path will include our inserts, our channel strip, and our send effects. And we could also have the master effects. So let's say I want to do this as one event. I can now click and I could choose to mute the source events so that it's not playing back at the same time. So this is a heavy CPU type plugin. We can now just come over here, hit render, and this will create one file, and we'll see 3 different spikes of amplitude, all covered with all of our effects automatically rendered in place. Within the audio file. And you can do that for multiple files, multiple tracks at the same time. Okay, so to see when will question that were submitted yesterday to the Club Cubase be answered, please? So I think we got one yesterday about synchronization. So let's read this. Let me know if this is the question. Says, hi, Greg. I've tried for a solid 2 days to get my Akai MPC Live to be in sync with Cubase. I'm running Cubase 9.5 on Mac OS X Pro, Mac Pro 2012. Just upgraded to Cubase 11, but not running anything yet. The Akai MPC can send and receive MIDI timecode and MIDI clock. I want to slave Cubase to the Akai. The Akai MPC has several modules and synths connected to it, and the timing is incredible, just like the old Cubase from years ago. I have several long audio files in Cubase and some in the sample track, and they do not play on time. It is off. The tempo is matched on both the Akai and Cubase. Also, when I press play on the Akai MPC Live, Cubase does not start right away. It catches up a bit too late. Basically, there's a lot of video on how Cubase is the master, but almost none for Cubase being in slave mode because basically like Tape Machine. I don't want to record all the parts from Akai and the modules are connected to the Akai into Cubase digitally. The idea is to stay all analog. The tools in Cubase to edit audio are wonderful, so I want to use the best of both worlds. All the outputs of the modules, the Akai MPC Live and sound card from Cubase, go to Mixing Desk, and then we capture that onto another recording device. I want to be able to jump around in Cubase to different parts of the audio, and all this is controlled by MPC. Hope this makes sense. And this from Peter Black, so I'm not sure if this is the question that was just referred to. So in that scenario, in the old days, if you're syncing MIDI to tape, you could just do it with MIDI timecode and you'd convert to SMPTE or MIDI timecode recorded on an analog tape to Cubase, and Cubase would, would slave to the tape machine. When you're dealing with digital audio, what you have to do is to make sure that not only is it sending MIDI timecode, that's not enough for the audio. That's not precise enough for the audio, but you need to have a device that's going to take the MIDI timecode and convert that to a BNC word clock often, and feed that into a device that will take the word clock and the MIDI timecode so that the audio can resolve to that. A lot of different higher end digital, tape machines and stuff will have that function so that you could, and most sync boxes will, like I have a couple in my rack, will be able to take the incoming MIDI timecode and be able to take and generate the clock output for the digital audio. So the clock output is, I looked at the picture of the Akai, and that doesn't seem to have a clock output. So that wouldn't be a good device to try to sync a digital audio workstation, because it's not going to be precise enough for the digital audio. So your digital audio will drift because it's not resolving to the same clock. So you need to get a device that would synchronize, that would take incoming MIDI timecode and connect that to, and send out the MIDI timecode to Cubase, to a MIDI interface or to USB port, and to the clock of your audio interface, because it's your audio interface that's not able to synchronize to the MIDI timecode of your Akai MPC. And that's why you don't see many people using the Akai as a master, because in digital audio workstations, it's not capable of properly synchronizing it with just the included tools. So you may be able to get a additional sync box and connect the sync out, like the word clock out to your the word clock input of your audio interface and the MIDI timecode to your computer, but you would need to resolve the clock as well. Okay, so we have a question. I'm using Cubase Pro 11 on Windows 10. When searching for loops in the right zone, the virtual keyboard is activated and filters my key commands. Is there a way to stop MB from using virtual keyboard? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so let's see. So here it's not activating. So here my virtual keyboard isn't getting activated automatically. But I seem to, let's see if I hit, sorry, wrong key command here. So, you have the on-screen keyboard, but that doesn't seem to be activated. Let's say this is from a MIDI loop. Let me try from maybe keyboard samples, like from an instrument. All right, so say if I'm here, so this keyboard here, you know, as I'm loading up different sounds, if I hit play, this isn't turning on. So when I go to the on-screen keyboard, which isn't activated from the MediaBay, that will block because it's using your keyboard as a controller. So that will block the keys. So you could just turn this off, but that's not turned on via MediaBay. So you could just hit Alt or Option K, and then you could still come over here and, you know, try your different keys to audition. But you could just probably hit Option or Alt K, so maybe you open that up in the background, but it's not tied to MediaBay. All right. I just see a comment on Maschine says, I thought with Maschine you just use it switch to generic mode, so maybe that will help. Okay. Let's see. Question: visibility tracks. Is it possible to save, restore different sets up of visibility? If not possible, is there any way to get it only in the mix console? So let's say if I have okay, I'll just do a new project. Okay, so I'll add 8 group tracks, 8 instrument tracks. Or 8 audio tracks, 8 instrument. Eight samplers. And let's say 8 groups. Okay, so when I'm here, I could just go to my visibility. So let's say if I wanted to okay, so I will just come here to my visibility. Okay, so I will just come right over here to configurations. And let's add a configuration and call it audio. Okay. And I'll update that configuration. All right, so now I wanted to have these visibilities. I'll add this as instrument. And we'll do one more. Okay, so now if I wanted to come over here, let's say, okay, I want to switch. I want to go to my audio tracks. I want to see instrument tracks, and I want to see sampler tracks. So now we come over here, and if I wanted this to be synchronized with the mix console, I'll filter out my input channels here. But you can see these two little lines here. So you could synchronize project and mix console. So at this point, if I go to audio, we'll see all audio be selected here and synchronized with and we can do this in both mixers. I want to see all my instrument tracks, and I want to see all of my sampler tracks. And this way you could store different configuration views pretty fast that way. Okay. Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right. Great to see Sable Winters on the live stream. Okay, so question, I have the UR44 Cubase 10.5 and I always seem to have an echo to my headphones when I record. How do I get rid of that? So probably the fastest way is to come over here and go to your studio menu to audio to studio setup. Select the audio interface here and just put it on direct monitoring. So, and that will allow you to pass the input directly from the output, and with UR44 you have the capability of running it through additional DSP as well. So, but just put it on direct monitoring right there, and that should get rid of the echo for you. All right, we see Jan getting kudos from Michael Teams for the CubaseIndex.com. See, great comment from Gareth. Be careful with the constrained delay compensation. If you're stupid like me, you'll forget you have it on and think your plugins are broken. So that can happen. All right, so we have Philip from Shoreline, Connecticut. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. How can I preview the sample library simultaneously through headphones and control room? It seems like only one way or the other, but not both. So a lot of times when you go to your audio interface, you may just be able to, most audio interfaces will allow you to have the main output be routed and have the main output be mirrored into your headphones. So if you're coming here, you go to your control room, so you could have kind of a separate headphone volume here. And that could be a different like physical routing. But if we go to, let's just give this a try. If we go to your audio connections and go to control room. So let's say I want to have this as my phones as well. All right, so we see that sometimes we can't assign the same destination twice, but if you go to preferences and go to control room, I think if let's see if this... Yeah, so I think we could use the... So I would see if your audio interface mirrors, like just about all of them do, will mirror the headphone output, from the main outputs that you have set up. So that's what I would try to do. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of either or scenario here between the headphones in the control room and the headphone and your studio monitors. So, but like all of my audio interfaces, all the Steinberg ones, so I have a UR24C, and that just mimics the outputs 1 and 2 to the main headphones. And then you'll be able to kind of hear it in both destinations. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so I'm scrolling back. All right, so I may have lost a couple of questions, but one of the questions I saw before my chat field jumped on me is between monitor A and B is a huge volume jump. How to fix that in the control room? So if we just come here, we select A and B. Let's go to our inserts tab. So I'll bring the main down. All right, and then when we click on the monitors, here we could have an independent level control for each of the monitors. So if I want C to be much softer, then D to be louder, we could adjust the volume control, but you have to be in the, not in the main tab at the bottom, but in the inserts tab, and click on the monitors, and then you'll see the volume appear. So this way each monitor could have its own independent volume as you switch. So if you see, you just set this back to, so there you could just set it to 0 dB and attenuate the volumes there. So I think I may have lost a couple of questions. So I apologize for that. So just see question, in Cubase 10.5 with the UR24C in Studio, can I have separate main and phones control? So yeah, because you have 4 outputs with the UR24C. So if you wanted to come to your control room setup, we could just say your audio connections. Let's go to your control room. So I could say outputs 3 and 4 will be coming out of like DAW Direct 2. And so that's my phones. And then I wanted my monitors to go out of mix left and right. All right, so just going through more comments. Sorry, I lost a couple of questions. All right, so we see Lawrence from Rhode Island. Welcome to the live stream. So I just see a question. Can contact output be merged with MIDI trigger tracks? I found a way to hide MIDI tracks in mix console and to label outputs properly. Just wondering, are there other ways for this situation? So I would, just come over here and, instead of doing a MIDI track and I see that I probably missed some discussion on this, but I would just try to add an instrument track and route that out to, like, here I have Hallian, which is kind of a sampler similar to in concept to what's going out. And this way I don't have a separate MIDI track. I don't have a separate audio return channel. It just is working solely kind of integrated together. So maybe if you use an instrument track versus a MIDI track routed to a virtual instrument. All right, so from Sub 403, question, how can I set up a custom drum map preset? Okay, so let's say if I add it'll start with, we could do it on this one as well. So we'll see this drum map here, and then we could just go to drum map setup. And then at this point, you could just kind of type in whatever pitch, the name, if you want it to be the same in note, out note, what type of head you want if you're doing it for notation. So, and then once you have that all done, you can just go to functions and save. And then that will be a custom drum map that you could have automatically loaded up with a particular instrument. If you save it as a track preset, but now you could just come right here again where you see no drum map and just go to drum map setup. Okay, so just see about dragging an audio file from just do a new project here into the sampler track with a volume discrepancy. So let's take a look. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and listen.
Feel good. Make you feel good.
All right, so let me just...
Don't it make you feel good, knowing that somebody loves you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and...
Knowing that somebody, don't it make you feel good, knowing that somebody loves you. Knowing that somebody loves you.
Sounds pretty much the same, but it could be that if you have, let's see if we adjust like gain here. So say if we got gain and we dragged it in.
Knowing that somebody, don't it make you feel
so that would be
good, knowing that somebody loves.
So like if there's maybe you have gain, like clip gain applied to it that's not transferring over, but the raw audio file seems to be the same for me. So let me know if I did something different than you, Pylon Records. All right, so we have Peter checking in from Montreal. All right. Reading through comments. All right, so we have Neurotic Nexus has made the live stream. Great to have you. Okay, question. Does Cubase have the same Ambisonics functionality as Nuendo? I'm using Soundfield microphones with borrowed Nuendo license, so I'm thinking to purchase Cubase myself. So yeah, you could definitely just, as you go to add an audio track, come right over here. So for the Ambisonics capability, it'll be the same between Cubase and Nuendo. So you could do up to third order Ambisonics, and so but the Ambisonics functionality will be the same. Okay, so question, is there a way to set a function button on the CC121 to have all selected tracks routed to a group channel that you're creating with that same keystroke? So let's give it a shot. So let's say if I want to take all of these harmony tracks here. All right, and let's go to my CC1. All right, I'm just going to find where the function is quickly using. So it doesn't look like, maybe if I can add a group track, but not the tracks. All right, I'll give it a shot again here. Yeah, so it looks like I can add a group channel, but not from the selected channels. I'll try again. Yeah, so it doesn't look like that's available from the CC121. Sorry about that. But you could always just select and right click and just add a group channel to selected channels. But I'll mention that as kind of a missing function. All right, great to see David and Kristen from Nashville on the live stream. Hope you guys are well. All right, so we have Steven checking in from Buffalo. Okay, so I see, let's see, question from Sven. When I remove VST Connect Pro, so let me just go ahead and do a new project. Okay, so let's go ahead and, okay, so the question is, when I remove VST Connect Pro, Perform Record, VST Connect Input, and VST Connect Q channels must be manually removed. Sometimes even the Connect latency sticks around. It appears the only way to purge a project from VST Connect Pro is to shut it down, and sometimes Cubase Pro itself, and restart everything. That is not what is described in the manual. So let's take a look. Okay. So I'll quickly repair. Okay, so let's say I have this set up and VST Connect there, got my Q. Let's check out the main inserts. Okay, and let's take a look at remove VST Connect. So that looked like it removed everything on my end with the plugins that could be causing latency, but let me know if yours is behaving differently. Okay, so we have a question. Can Chord Track help you modulate to a new key? So you could definitely use kind of Chord Track for that, but it may not get you into like setting up the modulation. But you could, so let's say if I have a Chord Track here. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and, you know, you could listen to, let me just load up a quick instrument that we could listen to the chords on. Okay, so and let's say I wanted this to modulate starting here. So let's say I'll just take these up a major second. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . Okay, so what we could do is, let's say if I wanted to go to this chord here, so let's say we have E. You could go to the chord assistant, and this could give you different suggestions. So you may want to say based on cadence or proximity. So you could say, okay, what chords, and we could have this kind of automatically look at, what the chords are, like when we're in the chord assistant area. So you could look at it based on the list. So you can say, okay, you want it to be, maybe you wanted to do, let's say, simple chord progressions. Let's say they're based on common notes. So you could try maybe, so you can see if this will. So that way it could kind of give you like an idea of the chord, looking at the chord before and after, what to do to set up a modulation. So just by using kind of the chord assistant. Okay, so let's see. Question. I've got a flickering issue with Cubase. The screen flickers like the snap function is confused. I've updated all my drivers. It's on the PC using an NVIDIA graphics card. Help, please. So I don't have an NVIDIA graphics card, but I know a lot of people, and maybe some other people could chime in here, is, kind of taking away kind of all the extra software that NVIDIA often installs, and then maybe, uninstalling that and just using a basic driver for it seems to help people. And I see Jazz Dude, who's does a lot of PC configurations. He's also suggesting NVIDIA users search for studio drivers and try installing them. So, all right. So nice to see Pete from Portland, Maine. Says some JVI says this isn't a Cubase question. Says when setting up multiple monitors, my graphics fan starts making too much noise. If you use a docking stations for the extra monitors, would that help diminish the load on the graphics card? So I would maybe check to see, probably, the docking station may not help so much with that, but depending on the monitors, if it's like a USB-C or a Thunderbolt monitor, some docking stations may help with that. But if you could let us know like what type of monitors, maybe other people could help as well. Okay, how is the efficient way to synchronize audio tracks? I see synth timing fluctuation, old funk tape straight to 120 beats per minute. Okay, so let's say if you have an audio track that's, not recorded at a perfect tempo and you wanted it to, that has tempo fluctuations and you wanted it to be a steady tempo. So we can go over here. So I have no tempo correlation here. So what I want to do is just have Cubase figure out what the tempo is of the file. So you hear the metronome. This is not following the music. The music's not following the metronome. So I'll go to my project menu. Let's choose a tempo detection. And here you may have some settings like how to adjust my offbeat correction. So it's now figured out kind of what the tempo is. And I'm just going to define the downbeat here. And it'll place it into a 1/4 meter, but just probably what you want to do is just come over here and just put 4/4 the downbeat. Select the audio file, go to your audio, to advanced, and we're going to say set definition from tempo. And that may, if you're doing a lot of files, it may take just a minute, but now the tempo metadata has been applied to the audio files itself. So I could say, make this a perfect 144 beats a minute. Now it's going to play back without any tempo fluctuations. So if you want to take things that were fluctuating a little too much, you could just change and kind of regulate the tempo that way. Okay, so question, how to reduce the volume of a selected portion of audio located in the same track. I've seen it done in other programs, but cannot figure out how to do it in Cubase. So really all you have to do is just grab the portion with your range select tool, hold Shift plus X, and then you could just go, that will split. And then once you're here, go to the top, and then you could just adjust the volume there. So if you have this set to kind of combination mode, just go to the top, hit Shift X, and then you could just bring down the clip gain of that particular region that easily. All right, great to see Millard Brown on the live stream. And yes, you did miss a giveaway, so. All right. All right, we see Agent K is doing his volunteer duty with very well. Thank you for that. Okay, so to see, Greg, when next update be out? So I think we'll have one that's pretty imminent. So keep your eyes out for it. All right, so to see from Sir Galaxy, please pass along to the dev and QA team that Cubase 11 Pro has been the best release in regard to stability. I was able to immediately transition from 10.5 to 11. Bravo, that's great. I'll make sure to pass that along. Okay, so, all right, so I see it was the right question I responded to for Pylon Records. Okay. And just see a question, is this like FL Studio or something? So we're looking at Cubase and how to get the most out of your Cubase program and other Steinbergs. So see a question, is this available on Linux? So we have Cubasis on Android and iOS, and we have Cubase for Mac OS and Windows. So, but it's not available on Linux, sorry. So just see how to mix for vinyl. Can we produce cut sheets? So a lot of times when people are getting ready for vinyl stuff, you generally try not to mix differently for one medium that you do for other ones. Obviously with vinyl, sometimes you may have to treat the bass a little differently. But if you wanted to do a lot of those functions, like getting stuff ready for vinyl, I would probably look at, Wavelab would be kind of what a lot of people would use for getting stuff ready for vinyl. So let's say, let's see if I have so if you wanted to see a number of, different audio that's going to be kind of laid out for you, this is where we could do a lot of the different functions in Wavelab when we get into like the montage editor. And that's where probably I would do. So I'm not sure what you mean by cut sheets, but that would give you like a DD. You could create a DDP image and kind of see how your CDs would be laid out for you. Okay. I've been tossed on post-production jobs, but they work in Cubase. Is there any options to create a sync point on your media and snap this sync point to your transport bar? So I think if you wanted to just find a particular file here. Check out something from the Noir library. So sometimes you may have something that's like where you want that actual impact. So let's say if I have this file in, so I think this may be what you mean, where you don't want it to necessarily synchronize at the beginning of the audio file itself, but you want it to be, let me see if I can find a more obvious example of this quickly. Okay, so all right, so as we go to our editor, okay, so you can see that you have this little sync point. So you can say show audio event. this little icon here. And now as you play, so let's say we just audition this particular sample and you want that impact, you can now move this sync point to where that impact is. And now it'll snap directly to that point as opposed to the beginning of the file. So let me know if that's what you mean. So if you wanted to create like a different sync point, that's how you could do it. Just select here, and then you'll see S, and then you could move that freely in a waveform, and then that will be your point of reference for where the audio event will snap to. Okay, Greg, was the topic addressed about the mute FX channel when audio tracks have effects as send and are routed to a group, which is then soloed? Effects goes mute. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a try. Just look for a quick project. Let's try this one. Okay, so let's say I have these all going to I'll add a group channel to this. We'll call her drums. Okay, and let's add a reverb. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so audio tracks have the effects as send and are routed to the group, which is okay. So let's say about mute effects channel when audio tracks have effects as send and are routed to group, which is then soloed. Okay, so I think if we come here, we could say if I wanted to solo the snare or say the kick. Okay, so we hear that, but I think if we solo the group now, that we don't have that. So let's, all right, so it could be that the group, like the effects aren't going to the group. So it's not as part of that signal chain. So if you wanted to do it, you could just route that. So say now if I route my snare. So it's just that the, that effects is kind of not being sent to that group, but you could send it to the group if you want it to. And let me just check. There might be a preference for this as well. So say I'll mute my drums. All right, so let's. Excuse me. So, but so, it's just because that revelation isn't being routed to the group, and that's why you're not hearing it, but you could route it to the group, and I think that will do what you want. All right, everyone's checking out, sending in their ice cream orders for Michael. All right, so we have Simon from Sunny Shoreham by Sea in England. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Chase has got his MG10XU, and it's so great. This plus the Audio-Technica headphones will level up my video game composition streams, especially with the effects. That's great. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. So I have lots of questions in my future here. Okay, reading through different. Okay, so I just see about my question above UR44, my direct monitoring box is grayed out. So make sure that you have the tools installed. So, I would maybe reinstall the tools for the UR44 because if that's not seen, it may be missing the link for the DSP. So I would try to reinstall the tools, and I think you should see that come back to being able to be active. Okay, so I just see from Pylon Records, I did this again, but maybe if I did it wrong, if you could please just drag an audio file from the audio track into a sample track, the audio level drops at least 6 dB. Do not take audio from sample packs, etc. So I think I did that already just previously, but I realize that I may not have done it by the time you asked this, but let me know if what he did on the vocal was different from that. All right, great to see Jeff Zabelski joining us for the live stream. See, there's lots of people forgetting their questions today. It's too good of a meal on Easter. All right. Okay, so just seeing from Vincent, Howdy again. I'm looking for a way to put a sync point or hit points with an event in order to make it snap to my transport bar's location. Okay. So let's say our location is, let's say if I put my sync point on this file here. Okay, so I have my sync point and let's move this. So let's say if I just say move to cursor. Then that sync point is what is actually moved to the cursor. So once you have that sync point set, so again, just come right here. So I move the sync point in slightly. I move my cursor here, so have that event selected, and you could assign a key command to this, but just go to move to cursor. So it looks like it's Control or Command L. And then you see it's not at the very beginning where the cursor was. So if I just wanted to come here, so Command or Control L, and then that will move that sync point based on the transport position. So thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. So just see, hi Greg. What is the best? Probably is what is the best clocking in studio setup? It says about external clocking, which I notice you have ticked. Should I be using external clocking with an ARMI interface? So if you're doing transfers, so let's see if I have mine set. So I may have just checked it. I don't have any digital connections on my interface, so I don't need it to be externally clocked. I may have just checked it previously, but if you were, synchronizing based on, time code or word clock, if you had a master clock in your studio, at that point you could just come over here and you could tell your audio interface to be externally clocked and to route it directly from which clock. And we often see this, like if you have let's say an interface that has an ADAC connection, that you would need to set the clock on that interface to, maybe you have the mic pre with an ADAT out connected to your ARMI card, and you want the ARMI card to be the master, and you have the mic pre just connected as slaving to the master. So it could really, don't look, I probably just had mine checked. But if you're doing, if you have a master clock like an Antelope or a Big Ben, and then you're clocking everything in your studio, like maybe a digital console, your studio tape machines, everything, legacy tape machines with, in conjunction, you want them all to be running off of a common clock. That's when you would enable external clocking. Okay, so we got a question from Jeff Zabelski about a HSO instrument, the Italian Symphonic Orchestra. So let's just give it a shot. Okay, so just say let me adjust my controller keyboard here. My son put some Legos on my controller keyboard. Okay. So let's take a look at the different articulations. All right, let me just look through. This is A sharp 1. All right, let me just make sure I have the right one. So it seems like, sorry, it's just right underneath my computer screen. So So I see it seems like it's not. So it may be a little different. Okay, so it just says, but when adding another articulation, such as adding accent to the staccato, it works. Found trill by zhso.fxb Cubase 6. I forgot what it's for. So the FXB is kind of older, and again, I think what you want to do is to download the Hallian Symphonic Orchestra sound set and not use the HSO, because the FXB is kind of more of a legacy preset format. So maybe if you just use the not the standalone Hallian Symphonic Orchestra player, but using the sounds inside of Cubase, inside of like Hallian Sonic SE or Hallian Sonic as the sound pack, that you should be, I think you should be all set. Okay, so question, hi, please let me know, how can I change the color of the wave? For example, you record a voice and you have the wave. How can it be changed? Please tell me this. I don't refer to channel color. Okay. All right, so we have the channel color. So if we select, we can see that gets inverted. But I think if we come over here, if you wanted to change the waveform, let's go to preferences, and under event display, audio, you could adjust like waveform brightness. So if you want like white waveforms, I go through white waveform periods. Just but you could just come over here, let's say to your preferences. You could adjust kind of the if you want to adjust the event opacity. So as we do this, so you could have like a white waveform if you wanted to, and if you didn't want background, just kind of come over here and go to your preferences, and you could go to like your audio files here. So let's go to default value. And then if you wanted to go to the event display, we could go to the chord opacity, like the background colors. I'll go back to. So if you wanted to adjust some of those things, look here in the preferences for the event display. So just choose and go back to where you were. So that will change the waveform color without affecting the channel color. Question, is it possible to have a key command to bring up certain plugins and display them on screen? Example, I want to press a key that will display the third-party EQ compressor from the stereo out channel. So I don't think it will do a key command, but I think we could do it through like a generic remote. So let's say if I have on my master, I wanted to come here and let's put on a frequency EQ. And let's say a squasher. Okay, so if I wanted to assign those particular keys, so I could do this from a Midi message. So if we go to generic remote, so I will just capture 2 notes here. So I'll just learn this note. So just set it on the right input. And let's say fader 2, I wanted to assign a different, or for control 2. So now I could say I wanted this to go to mixer, stereo out, insert frequency. I want this to go to mixer, stereo out, and edit. So now if I did this right, I should just be able to hit this MIDI message. And that will bring up that plugin. Hit another MIDI note. It will bring up any plugin that you have instantiated on that particular channel. So it's not a key command, but you could have a MIDI message sent to trigger that for you. Okay, so we just see from Pylon Records again about I just took a regular file from a commercial CD, imported it into Cubase audio track, then took the same audio file and dragged it to the sample track, and it's lost some 6 dB of value, Cubase 9.5. So, any file that I have here, I'll just do it again. I don't really have a commercial one that I could play unless I want to give my 3 children to YouTube for royalties. But I'll just come here. Let me just open that up again real quick. I have to reboot my Mac here real quick, but we'll see. All right, I'm going to reboot my Mac, so just bear with me for a minute and I'll go ahead and just get everything restarted in maybe just a minute or two. Hang on and I'll get everything back, so just hang on. I'll be right back. All right, so I think we'll be back, but I'm going to do a quick audio test and get Cubase up. All right, and just make sure everything is going through okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Our IT department puts fun things on our Mac that takes them forever to reboot.
Hi, welcome to the March 9th,
All right.
2020.
Okay, so let's go back to a question we had about, dragging from the track to the sampler track and it losing volume straight from the window. So I'm in version 11, so maybe the behavior's changed, but I'll come here and let me just set my output. So we're going to listen to it. So now I'm just going to drag this to the sampler track. So it seems like same level. Now also when you trigger the sample track, it could be that, depending on how hard you're hitting the velocity, maybe that's making a difference for you. But, again, it kind of seems like the same volume to me. But maybe you could try the version 11 trial version and see if it makes a difference for you. Okay, so I just see when I use my interface Focusrite 2i2 with my mic for audio recording in Cubase, I get like a dual voice. Does that happen to you before? So you probably just need to, either it could be within the Focusrite, you might have a knob on it. I think the 2i2 is kind of a small USB interface, so you may have to just set that monitoring to, you may have like a monitor knob where you could listen to more of the input signal versus the signal coming from the computer. So you may have to adjust that, but you could just kind of minimize the latency or not turn on plugins. or quickly just come right over here and try the constrained delay compensation, and that will bypass any plugins that are causing latency. So it could be, and if you have direct monitoring on your 2i2, make sure that you use that as well. And you could find that by going to Studio Setup, and it could be in the control panel for the device, but you may just have to enable direct monitoring right there. So you just see, is there a quick way of promoting clips from recorded lanes to the main track instead of dragging them up with the mouse? So let's go ahead and take a look. See if I have, okay, this project should work. So if you have a number, you could use the comp tool for this so you don't have to drag. So if we have a number of recordings here, and we'll say, okay, we have these as our lanes. So all you have to do is just select on the comp tool, and that will make it the active track or promote it. I think it's a terminology other companies use. So you can just click on the lane, and that will automatically promote that to the track just like that. So no dragging needed. Just use the comp tool. It looks like a hand. Okay, so you just see a question. Any way to have no text on the MIDI notes, just blocks, and also make the MIDI background space be much brighter? So if you wanted to, let me just go to a different project here. Okay, so let's say if we have some MIDI. Okay, so let's say if I, okay, to have no text on the MIDI notes, just blocks. All right, so if you're looking, so if you want the MIDI notes to be, I think that will turn on by default when the blocks are a certain height. So if it's the notes that you don't want to see, as you kind of get here, so as you zoom vertically, you could adjust where you don't, so as you get bigger, you see the text on the parts. Okay, so if you want the MIDI background space to be much brighter, you can go to Preferences, and I'll see if there's so if you go to User Interface, Color Schemes, you could go to Editor Area Background, and what you could do is just, well, I'll just move this up vertically and then hit OK. And then you could have the MIDI background be much brighter. So just kind of come here. So again, editor area background. And then you could just adjust accordingly. So like, okay, let's give this a try. So whatever you want it to be. So if you like that, or your default state as well. Okay, so just see a nice comment from Capital Razor. Thanks so much, Greg. You fixed my monitoring issue. That's why this Hangout is so valuable. No other DAW can give this kind of support. That's great. Thanks. I'm glad it worked out for you. And it's always good to be able to help people. All right, good to see that Tan May has made it onto our Hangout. I think it's the middle of the night for him where he lives. You see that Millard Brown is getting an espresso shot over Kona and asking if he could get us anything. So I'll take a mocha. Thanks, Mike Millard. I get a free mocha and we get ice cream from Michael. So. See, nice comment from John Costigan. Greg, thanks for the simple explanation. Configurations for audio instruments, MIDI, and sync with mixer. It's a great feature once you kind of get into it. All right, so we have a question. What is the usage of pre-roll and post-roll? Okay. Okay. So let's say if I have just move this audio event out. Okay, so I'm going to activate pre-roll and post-roll. Okay, so now what I could do is turn this on. So let's say I wanted to, every time that I play from this particular point, like maybe you want to catch a pickup note, it'll just go back one measure. So I stop, hit play, it does a pre-roll of one measure when that's activated. And then when we stop, let's say I wanted to go for 2 beats. After I hit stop, so I'll just play this. So I play, rolls back one measure. So if you need to catch like a pickup note and then punch in, and then as soon as I stop, let's say at the end of the phrase here, the post roll will just go like an extra 2 beats. So that's kind of the intention. Okay. Okay, so I just see a question. Cubase 11 MediaBay right-click search for path does not return any results for third-party content. Any content with a drive letter in the path breaks the search functionality. All right, so I don't think I have a lot of third-party content on here. But it depends if the third-party content is VST3 plugins. So VST2 plugins, and a lot of third-party may have kind of their own, their own formats for presets and stuff like that. So let's just say MediaBay, right click, and let's say search for. Okay, so let's say I will. Okay, so I think I had just come here, and let's say I just wanted to search in that particular folder. All right, so let me just. Okay, so just. So I see where it says search for path breaks the search criteria. We just. All right, so it's going to just search. I'll do some more research if you want to email me. I think it's mis.ox. Because it looks like that's searching for that one particular path, which is already selected. So that may not be. But if you could let me know, and what third party stuff, if it's VST3 or VST2, that would be helpful information as well. Okay, so you see question. Hello, Greg. Is there any trick how very quickly export external hardware synth from MIDI to audio? So, there's not a quick way of doing it. It has to be done in real time because obviously the external synth is not part of the VST system. So it has to record it in real time because the MIDI is being sent out to it, and then it has to just record it in real time because the synth has to generate the sounds, and the synth hardware synths aren't capable of working like VST instruments in that way. So, many people will record if you have it set up as an external instrument. So let's say if you go to your studio setup or to your audio connection setup rather, and you have your external instruments configured. So let's say, okay, I wanted to come here, I have my montage, and I have MIDI going out to it. So let's say I have this, and this is all my data. And if I choose to just, freeze and I have MIDI notes here, and I choose to freeze that instrument or that part, it would have to play that in real time because the external hardware synth is generating the sound in real time. So that's just kind of physics. So. Okay, reading through more questions. All right, so question from Jeff Zabelski. I have an Okay, so Jeff's going to eye appointment. My reel-to-reel captures one of the waves. Amplitude values are not the same. The bottom portion of wave was normal. The upper part attenuated. A bias, maybe a bias issue recording. So what I would try to do, Jeff, is to select the file. And I think, and this is a common thing that a lot of people overlook. And there's like all sorts of wonderful records have done that just missed this one little critical step that some mastering engineers just go, I can't believe they just didn't check this one thing. And it's going into your audio to processing. So to go to processes and try to do a remove DC offset and see if that takes care of it for you. Okay, the chord assistant, an 8-chord sequence, chord 6. I want an alternative. How do I get chord assistant to help come up for suggestions just within those 8 chords and not the next part of the song? All right, so let me just add some chords in a chord track here. Excuse me. Okay, so let's say we have our chords here. Okay. Okay, so chord 6, I want an alternative. How do I get a chord assistant to help come up with suggestion just within those 8 chords and not the next part of the song? So I think the chord assistant, as you do this, if you enable gap mode, that this will help you come up with, there's gap mode, and this will take like the chord in like conjunction from before into effect. So try just to use, maybe the gap mode here and see if that does the trick for you, JVI. So a question, I think we covered this a little bit, but anyway, we can get more control over changing the background colors. Everything is so dark. So again, just kind of go to preferences, under event display to color scheme, and we could choose like the project area background here. So if I want that to be more bright, if I did it correctly this time, that would be good. So if you wanted to be able to adjust. So pretty much, your different background windows here, different editor windows you can adjust. So I'll just go back to my default settings. So I just see a question. Hi, Greg. In control room is planned to have a return talkback in future. So I'm not sure if the return talkback is like someone talking in the control in like in the recording room. If that's what you mean by kind of return talkback for communication. So a lot of times people just kind of leave an open mic. Like it's kind of a common thing. People leave kind of an open mic, like an Omni in the room, and that way everyone could talk. So, and then you could just have that as like a two-way communication. But if I'm misunderstanding, Miguel, let me know. But I haven't heard of any plans for that, but we could definitely kind of pass it along. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to name, color a MIDI or audio track and its part in the sequencer, and also its representation, in the channel mixer at the same time? I'm currently writing and coloring them 3 times. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a new project. All right, so right now, I'm just going to select all of my tracks here. I'm going to select the color tool from my tools. And then I'll just select the color here. And all the colors are selected in the mix console as well as the tracks. So I think I have to do it once. So make sure that you're not doing the events, but you're doing the tracks. And then those track colors are automatically carried over into the mix console. To see a question from Sub 403. It'd be really cool if there was a way we could do a collaboration hangout where each person could add an element. It could be tricky to kind of get everything going for a presentation like that. But maybe we do a little bit on some of the Zoom meetups at the end of the month. So we could do some more of that. Okay, so to see from Sven, when it's about with our VST Connect. So I'll do this again here. So we'll create our VST Connect. It says when you removed the VST Connect, the performer record channel wasn't removed. The plugin on the Q channel was removed, but not the send channel itself. So you didn't show the mix console. I can't tell if the input is still there. So let's go ahead and take a look. So our VST Connect is there. We'll go to our control room. So it looks like it was removed from there, but the input channel is still there. But I'll check the I'll check the documentation on that, Sven. If you want to send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel. All right, reading through comments. So I just see from Michael Pierce, have any of the emailed in questions been answered yet? Spotted one on Twitter that piqued my interest. So yeah, we did both. We only had 2 questions that were emailed in this week, so we covered both of them already. So I just see from William Getz, can we ask questions here? Certainly. Yeah, that's what the chat field is for. So just ask your question and we'll get to it eventually. Okay. So I see from Jeff, Greg, your thoughts on low level mixing, then maximum volume that you double check it with, if ever. So some of my, probably the finest mixing engineer, I think pretty much everyone would agree to this. If you got like a whole group of audio engineers together, who would be kind of the most highly regarded mixing engineer would probably be Elliot Scheiner. And he is notorious for mixing incredibly low volumes. So like when he's mixing a project, and he's done like everyone, like Steely Dan, like all the amazing Steely Dan records, but often his mixing volume just kind of can frighten people sometimes, because he'll be mixing kind of like where most people might be mixing somewhere around here. He's mixing at volumes like this all the time. And for him, it's just like, okay, his ears are actively listening. He could tell the difference in like, kick and snare and bass and vocal levels. If it sounds good at a low volume, the room isn't as critical. So there's a lot of benefits. So it's obviously worked really well for Elliot. I think that it's a really good system. I've seen him do it, and I mean, he's incredibly talented, but that's the one trick that he just can't figure out why most people don't do it, and they crank it up and give themselves ear fatigue. And he's just very super soft, and he's very actively listening, and he could do that for a long time without ruining his perspective. So thanks for all the wonderful questions. And if you if you have learned something new, make sure you hit the like button as well as subscribe to the channel. All right. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Are there ways of editing DSD in Cubase currently, or are there any plans to incorporate that? So currently we only work with PCM audio files. A lot of DSD stuff can't really be edited, and that's kind of the disadvantage to it. I think that there's maybe one or two platforms, but it's kind of a different beast. So, but it's not currently in Cubase or Nuendo or Wavelab. So we just deal with PCM audio. See, great comment from Casey Dotson. Sync points are enormously handy. Okay, so see, I have many tracks from years ago, and I used Hypersonic VST. Now I can't open those tracks. I was using a PC at the time. I get all sorts of errors. Now, if I want to open the tracks, need help, please. So, Hypersonic we did in conjunction with a company called Wizu, and that was discontinued 2004. So, and unfortunately, we were doing distribution for it. It was owned by Wizu, and they decided to discontinue support on it. So I know it's a Steinberg branded product, but we lost all the rights for distribution and continuation of that. So you may have to find other sounds or just choose to ignore tracks that have Hypersonic in it. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski's mentioning he has a new build and monitor. I was like, wow, you can see everything Greg is doing. He's fast. So, okay, question from John Koskinen. If I used a SPDIF input on my UAD Apollo, do I need to use that input as the clock input? It really depends on, you don't have to, but you could, if you're doing it, make sure that you have the other device that you're connecting via SPDIF, that you have that set to external clock. See Gareth mentioning Greg has minimum technical specifications to be watched. He's always so witty. All right. So we see any news on MIDI controllers in Cubase? Are we working on implementing on-screen DAW control, or do we still need to lose our time with generic MIDI device approach? So I think, that there's been some rumors that something is being worked on, but you may have to wait for the next version. But, the generic remote kind of works currently, but I think there could be some exciting things in the works. So question from Lawrence. If only thing plugged into the computer running Cubase is my Mode 2 interface, do I need external clock checked? Preamps with digital out and interface are connected with word clock to Black Lion clock. So you could use internal clock in Cubase with your Motu, but just make sure that make sure that the Motu, probably in their console software, whatever their mixer software, is set to be clocked from your Black Lion. All right, so we see a nice comment from Menno. Thanks, Greg. As always, best videos on YouTube. Chill voice explains it all step by step, and not one time you didn't know an answer to it. Thanks, mate. I'm sure probably the next one I'll get stumped on. So you jinxed me. All right, sorry, just getting bombarded with emails. Okay, just reading through comments. You see Gareth is going to dinner. Okay, going through different comments here. Lots of great discussion. I am always 30 minutes behind on. Okay, so we have a question. How does project root key work? So when we kind of set the root key, and this could be for some content that that has metadata for keys in it. So let's say we do a new project, like some of the SQL content. This is a function that was introduced in SQL. So let's say if I wanted to go to some of the different loops, let's go to and just go to my control room here, turn this up. All right, so let's say if I have this, let me find. I'll just drag this in. So let's say. So now if I set my root key to that, here you can now just kind of set your key, and it could be like, it's not all content will follow the root key, but most of the SQL stuff will. So to see from Sven, I really wish that manufacturers would agree to a direct monitoring implementation standard like they did with Midi. Remember the olden days, each manufacturer had its own communication system when nothing worked with nothing. So yeah, the biggest problem is Apple, when they released Core Audio for Mac, is they just took out direct monitoring because a lot of the manufacturers were doing it directly via their control panel. So, that was a kind of a big confusion point because we had direct monitoring in OS 9 and it was just kind of taken out for OS X in 10.10.2 or 10.2 at the time. So one of the, main operating systems took away the ability natively. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to grab the bass note from a chord track, send the chord bass to a MIDI track? Okay, so let's say if I have chord pads here. Okay, so let's say if I have these and I will just glue all of these together and I'll just hold down the Alt to glue them all together, make them one nice happy part. So let's say if I wanted to take the bass notes from these chords, I think we showed this maybe on the last Hangout or last live stream. We can go over here to MIDI, to Logical Editor. And we want to, on function, we want to choose extract. And we're going to say type is equal to note. And then we want to say position. Or maybe context variable. Inside range. And we'll say lowest note number in chord. So lowest is 0. So I'm going to come here, type in 0. Okay, so now I will run this. If I did it correctly, it's now going to, we look at these notes. We see that I could come here to this particular. Let's see if I did it correctly. Try it one more time just to make sure. I'll say E is equal to lowest note in the chord, sorry. So now we have just the bass on this part. And when we look at this part, we could double click and the bass notes have all been extracted into a completely separate track. So come over here, function, extract, type is equal to note, context variable is equal to note number in chord. And we can say 0, that's going to be the lowest note in the chord. And then just hit apply. See Jazz Dude bragging about all the cool concerts he got to see with Pink Floyd and Sabbath, Deep Purple, and Fleetwood Mac. So did you see Jazz Dude? Did you see Fleetwood Mac with Bob Welch? Was it that era? He's a friend of mine. right, so we see I can no longer post in chat, posted it in the chat. So right, reading through comments. All right, so I just see from Kai, when Franklin, Greg, and Media, is it possible to have the media files play in the key the song is? For instance, if I'm using a chord track, will this with the scale indicator? So I don't think that we could do it for audio. But if we go to Audition, let's say if I have a chord track, give me just a second. So here we could say for MIDI loops, we could say link to the chord track. So as I come here, we could just say, okay, I want to take this piano part. And let me just make sure it's in play. But there isn't a way to like take a loop that's in, G major. And if you have, an E minor 7 flat ninth to make that automatically audition for audio files, but you could do it from MIDI. All right, so just see from, I've been told that Steinberg is working on a new API, no development since my post on January 14th. So, I think it has been announced that they are working on a MIDI control API, and why you may not see it is because, it's not released yet. So sometimes they don't talk about things that aren't released. So again, we see a question on DSD. So, hi Greg, is there a way to import and edit DSD recordings? Is this a feature that will be supported in the future? I thought that used to be a plugin that enabled this in one of Cubase's versions. So no, I haven't heard of any plans for DSD. It's one of the reasons probably why the form of digital audio didn't really take off, is because you couldn't really edit easily. So I haven't heard of any plans of being able to edit DSD recordings in Cubase. So. All right, Greg, is there a way to convert stereo wave files into mono files in a range window without using pool function convert? Yeah. So we'll just come over here. Okay, so I will just select the track here, go to project, and you can just go to convert tracks once the project is activated. So project convert tracks, and we'll say multi-channel to mono. And then you'll have it done just like that. So, and if you want to do the opposite, you go convert tracks, mono to multi-channel. So I just see, hi Greg, what age group would you say use Cubase the most? After last week's Zoom, I would say 40 plus. I'm 41. Myself, been a Cubase user since 90s, but younger friends I have use other DAWs. Why do you think that is? So, I think a lot of people may get into, see how, if I could be politically correct. So some people may get into other DAWs that are more accessible with, they may kind of start off with DAWs that have less stringent copy protection. So some people will do that, but our sales do incredibly well. So I don't know what the demographics are, but we have wide range of users, all over the world in different age groups. So. All right, so we see from Jay in Connecticut. Hi, Greg. Might you please request a feature as notes fingerings chosen are often instrument specific? Could we please get assistant to recommend piano roll notes based on instrument? So, I mean, the chord is kind of the chord. I mean, there's different voicings for guitar and piano, just by the nature of the instruments. But yeah, I could pass it along. But I think most chords kind of work the same way. There's obviously differences between piano and guitar, and there are settings for those. All right, so seeing more discussion on DSD. Okay, so just see, I've been wanting to identify chords in the piano roll editor, selecting them vertically. Saw that somewhere, but haven't been able to find it again. So let's go ahead and take a look. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. All right, so let's say if I'm in my piano roll editor, and we'll just make it nice and big here. If you go to the little setup window, all right, make sure, I think it's a status line. And then as you kind of hover over, you'd see the chord indicated here. But just make sure that you have, see, as I move to different chords, that you have the status line enabled, because you don't have that enabled, then you won't necessarily see it. But you could also just come here, and in Cubase 11, you could also just see the chord track as a global track within your editor as well, which is very helpful. All right, we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a plugin in Cubase which allows you to use external hardware processors on selected tracks? All you have to do, and this is in Cubase Pro, Nuendo, you go to audio connections and go to your external effects. So let's say you have a distressor, and you need to connect this to the inputs and outputs of your converter or your audio interface. And once you have that on, we can, let's say if we add an audio track here quickly, then you'll just come to the like an insert or send, whatever you would do it, and you'd see under external plugins. So you could see your distressor right here. You have your send gain, return gain, and you could click on measure delay, and that will ping the system and compensate for any delay. So you don't need a special plugin for it. You know, Cubase has done it, I think, since version 3, something like that. All right, so seeing more discussion on the API for MIDI controllers. So I'm sure that they're probably working on something, you know, but a lot of times, you know, when they do something, they want to make sure it's fully realized and that it takes, you know, into account a lot of different aspects because many people use different MIDI controllers. So, you know, just kind of, I'm sure someone is working on it. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay, we have from hi Greg, Rude here from Switzerland. Thanks as usual. Is there any possibility to copy and paste an insert from a channel to another channel in the control room? Thanks for your help. So let's see. I know we could do it in the mix console, but let's see if we could do it in the control room. All right, so let's say maybe in the monitor section, I guess. All right. Okay, so we'll have our graphic EQ here. So let's say we have this set up. So I don't see a way to do it in the control room. Let's see if I copy it to like a dummy audio channel. If that makes a difference. All right, so not a good, easy way, but it looks like you could, you know, drag it from, you could drag it, you could copy it to an audio track and then copy that over to another control. But if you want to do from monitor to monitor, I don't see a way to do it, but I could play around with it some more. All right, so we see great comment from Ken. My only complaint is that I can only hit the like button once per live stream. All right, so we have Mickey checking in from Ethiopia. Welcome to the live stream. Okay, so I just have a question. What about distribution of Cubase, and especially in East Africa? Please tell me something. So I just work for the U.S. distributor. So I know a lot of times in different countries in different regions of the world that it's handled by Yamaha subsidiaries. So I could find out if you want to send me an email. I could pass it on to our export channel manager. And find out who is like where distribution is done in Ethiopia. So, yeah, so you could email me clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, reading through different comments. All right, so sub 43 says Greg for president 2024. It's like I would only get to move like 6 miles away, so wouldn't be so interesting. All right, but thank you for the sentiment. There's the sub 403 has to get running. All right. Okay, so I just see a question about extracting from not the chord pads, but from the chord track. So the chord track, is not necessarily a specific, the when we look at the chord track itself, this is an E minor chord, but it really doesn't specify how that chord is voiced. So you would have to take the chords and convert that to like a Midi track here. So just drag and drop and then be able to run that. So it doesn't necessarily know the voicings of the chords. These are kind of like chord placeholders that different instruments could have different voicings on. So, but you could just drag any of the Midi from a chord track or any data from a chord track directly to a Midi part and just run that logical editor preset. Okay, so just see, I want a bass instrument to follow the chord track so I can change chords on the fly without the whole logical thing. It's easy to make a piano play whole chords for chords. On a chord track, it's impossible to make a bass instrument play the bass note. So you could definitely do that. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how. Okay, so let's say we have this. All right, so let's say I'll just have drums and bass. All right, so I'll just go to my chord, my bass part here. And now if I wanted to just so let's say I just wanted to paint some chords in. So say, okay, I'll make it a G chord. And the next chord I want it to be an E minor. And let's go to maybe a D chord. I'll just mute the chord track for now. So I just have the bass here. So let's say if I wanted to go to A instead. And I will come over here. Let's just transpose. But all you have to do for the bass part is just come over here. We'll go to the chords. And you say you want it to follow the chords. And you could just choose root note. And then your bass part will just follow the root note of the chords. So just in the chord voicings here, just kind of come right over here and just make sure that you're following chords. You can do chords and scales, chords only, scales, or root notes. So give that a try, Bob. Okay, so I see a question from Tim Weinheimer. When I open up the hub, how do I remove a song from the list? I right click to see the menu. It says remove song from it also. How do I rename the song without creating a new file? I use Windows 10. So currently, like, we can't remove. This is an issue. I think it'll be addressed very soon. But when you go to the hub, we'll say new project, we used to be that you could rename or delete. So I think we'll see those functions coming back soon. So, but currently it's an issue. Sorry about that. So we have a question in Cubase 10.5 external plugins automation different than Cubase 11, especially writing. Why? So it's it's going to be kind of the same functionality. The only difference is a cosmetic thing when you go to the instrument. It's just when you go to the external plugin. So let's say if I come to my external plugin, it used to be that there was a little icon in 10.5 that would ping the latency, and now it says measure delay. So, but the functionality is the same. All right, so just see a great quote from John Costigan, speaking of Bob Welch, thank him for Hypnotize. So yeah, Bob was a Cubase user. So he took his own life a few years ago, unfortunately. So he had it's really sad, but he's a really wonderful guy. I miss Bob and his wife, Wendy. All right, so we see Graham from Wiltshire in the UK. Thanks for another wonderful Cubase masterclass. Just fantastic. Well, thank you for the kind words. And it's just because we get a lot of likes and views that we're able to do these things. I hear my son is home, so it's his birthday, so he's very happy. So I may be doing the index tomorrow morning, just so I could spend some time with my son tonight on his birthday. So if the Hangout index is late, that's why. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. Okay, just reading through comments. People sharing all their great concerts that they've been able to see. All right, good to see Robbie Bowling on the Hangout from Dallas, Texas. Okay, so we see how to duplicate notes in the MIDI editor, like Ableton, please help. So if it's probably, usually when I get this question, it's kind of related to, so if something is like this, I could select all the notes and just hit duplicate like that, and that works kind of as expected. But if we actually start at let's say we start at the second note here. Okay, so let's say if I have something like this where we have space at the beginning and end, and I wanted to copy the whole measure, that if we just duplicate here, that it doesn't necessarily maintain the beat position. And if you need to do that, I understand, or it makes sense. And the guys at Steinberg, I've brought this to their attention many times. But if you go to because you're selecting the notes and not the range of notes. But if we go to our in-place editor, and you could do this by Command-Shift-I, that you could, let me just hide this. Okay. All right, so now if I wanted to select the range of time and duplicate it, we could just do that. So that may be what you want to do, where you wanted to copy the range of one measure and not just the notes within that particular measure. So I know I've kind of beat up the Steinberg developers over this and the product planning people for a while. Okay, so we have a question from Jan. What I understand, can I not use track version if I want track? Should different inserts? Have I understood correctly? In such cases, I have to use track copy. Thanks. So the track versions would use the same inserts, EQs, and but if you wanted to do like a variation on a particular track, you could just right click and duplicate the track and just do a variation there and maybe mute or disable the other track. But the track versions would maintain the same processing and mixer settings. Right, just reading through comments, and everyone's bragging about all the cool concerts they got to see in their youth. Right, my chat field jumped on me. All right, we see Pablo has made it back. Okay, so we have a question from Jay. Is it possible to have multiple chord tracks in the event we want to create arrangements, dancing around different scales, sharing notes? So you could have one chord track, but you can have track versions of the chord track. So if you wanted to come here, you could do a new version, or let's say I wanted to go to version 1. And let's say I just wanted to duplicate that and maybe change this chord. At that point, I could just say, okay, I wanted to see what that is like. And then you could just kind of go back and forth between the different track versions. And you could switch between your track versions. And you could kind of create a monster track version and do kind of a comp of your chords if you wanted to. Okay, so just I have a question I would like to ask. When will we have normal event volume envelope editing? The volume line should be in the middle of the event at 0 dB. So let's say, I'm not sure if it should be in the middle of the event, but you could just, if you want to do kind of pre-gain volume, you could just come here and adjust kind of gain directly on the file itself. You could do that. You could also just go to your envelope in your offline processing. So let's say if we go to processes and go to at the very top, envelope, and here you could set the envelope here. So let's say I'll just do a new version of this. So, but I don't see where it has to be in this at 0 dB is in the center. So, but maybe it works that way in some other programs, but. Okay, so we see a question from Gareth. Could you show how to best use the transpose options in the MIDI editor left pane? Can it auto detect chords? I can't seem to make it do that. Let me just find a song I was thinking of. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay, so let's say if I'm here. Okay, so let's go to our transpose. Okay, so let's say if I have all of my notes selected here, so we could choose to transpose, and we could apply the transposition, kind of like so. And if we wanted this to transpose, so let's say I'm in A flat, and I want to do my modulation to B flat, I could apply the transposition. We could also keep notes in specific ranges. So if this goes kind of like too high for the voicing of the particular instrument, that you're able to set the range. And he says, can it auto detect chords? I can't seem to be able to make it do that. So as you come here to the top, make sure you have the status line activated. And then as you kind of hover over different chords, you'll see the current chord display listed right there. And that should indicate the chords. Or as you mentioned before, you could just see the chord track as part of the global tracks within the project. All right, so we see it was Tim Weinheimer's son's birthday yesterday, so that's great. It's a good month for birthdays. Thanks for all the birthday wishes for my son. So I'm going to spend the night hanging out with him instead of doing the index. I'll do the index tomorrow morning. So I just see, hey, Greg, wondering if there's any plans to implement multi-IO devices simultaneously. I have two IO devices, Sonic Core 16 IO and a Motu 16 IO. I'm constantly having to switch device drivers. So a lot of times what's, happens is if you have both of the devices, some people on Windows will run ASIO for all, and you could see all of your, all of the inputs. And I think once you use it, you realize that it's pretty unsatisfying. And on the Mac platform, you could do an aggregate device in Core Audio, an audio MIDI setup, but it will compound your latency. But the problem is, the two devices, and if you're thinking about something that's, clocking it up to 192,000 samples per second, and those two clocks aren't synced to each other. So that gets to be the problem of Cubase could send it out, but they don't, if the two audio devices aren't properly synced, then that's where the issue gets to be. And that's why many people don't, that's why you don't see that happening much. So just see, are there any plans to save the sampler track preset with embedded sample to any location so we can build a library and get rid of the ties to the project or the original location? So currently when you save a sample in the sample track, so let's just say I want to take like this. I'll go to my sampler control, drag it in. And then when we save the preset at this point, we could save the track preset. And this will save it in a location that's accessible not only if you, switch computers, this will be able to be accessed in your user profile. so it's kind of an independent location that's not tied to the project. But if you wanted to make your own, you could just simply click here and just reveal in Finder, and this will show you exactly, just by right clicking, will show you exactly where that file is actually residing. So it's, so you could then go back and right click into that folder in the MediaBay and have access to it. But I'll kind of mention that as something that people want. But we want to make sure that it's kind of that you save a sample preset that you could use it in any other project as well, just as easily. All right, question from Jan. When I make a backup project, a backup drive, and then continue to work on the project, I think I see the project then continues to work on the back drive. Have you ever seen that? So I think once you do this, let me just... So check this setting here on the backup where it says keep current project active. And if you do that, then that current project will be active, and otherwise I think it may just start and go to the backup project. So check that setting right there, Jan. Okay, I just see a question. Guitar Rig 5 of Native Instruments is not visible in effects. What to do? So I think that's still a VST2 plugin. So make sure when you go to your studio menu, go to VST plugin manager. You should make sure that it's not showing up in the block list. Make sure that you have the VST the 64-bit version and not the 32-bit version, but you should be able to see it here. And since it's a VST2 plugin, you may have to just specify what folder that the guitar rig is, the DLL files or the plugin is located in, or it may not scan that folder. So VST3 plugins, that's kind of automatically taken care of for you. All right, so we got a revelation today from the current chord display for Gareth. And no worries on not sending a project yet, so just take your time. No big hurry, so. I'm not going to come over to Spain anytime soon to find you, unfortunately, with travel. Okay, so I just see a comment. It would also be great if we could have the automation directly over the event, like in other programs. That would save space. So I think the developers understand that, but it's also when you need to edit multiple parameters of automation at once, that format comes in handy. You see John Costigan's had 6 revelations today. Is it some kind of religious holiday or something, he asks? So that's good. All right. See how we're about 5 minutes left. All right, let me just... Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. All right. So just see Douglas Emerson's mentioning running ASIO for all, I get restricted to 44.1 or 48, whatever the lowest device I'm combining uses, compromises speed. It says, so usually I run one IO. So. All right, so I say I'm welcome in Spain anytime, so I'd love to go again. I haven't been in a long time, but I've been maybe 3 or 4 times in the past, like when I was in school. All right, hang on. Did I maybe catch up? All right, so I think I may have caught up. We'll see if there's any last minute questions or, there's a whole bunch of questions. Looks like it's coming in. Let's check it out. I see. How about for the 40th anniversary, let's release the Atari version, Greg. Let's make it happen. So I recently, about 2 years ago, I gave a bunch of my old Atari installs and dongles to Tom Holkenberg Junkie XL for a series he was doing that was set in the 80s. So he actually did the whole soundtrack, I think, on Cubase for Atari. Okay, so I think I reached the end of the questions. So we'll see if there's any last minute questions. If not, we'll wrap up a minute. Wrap up like a minute early, and we'll see how it goes. And as Gareth mentions, first I reached the finish line. So I hope that, thanks for all the wonderful questions. I hope that everyone's learned something. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. And we'll see everyone on Friday. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy and make some wonderful music. And I'll be here hopefully helping out and answering questions on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on Friday. Goodbye.